Hi, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This is episode 41, The Limits of Plunderphonics and Barber Beats. I'm Ross Payton, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Burke. How are you doing, Burke?
I was just sitting here thinking that I appreciate that you do such the classical, like I'm the host and the co-host intro, whereas I just ramble right into the topic. So I'm doing good. I'm thinking about our respective approaches.
Yeah. It's the same approach I pretty much do with every podcast I record when I intro them. It's muscle memory at this point.
For sure.
But yeah, our bonus episode on the Night Clerk Patreon on corporate art and aesthetics is out. Be sure to check that out if you're a patron. If not, you should become a patron because it was a really fun episode to record. We talked about corporate art styles and aesthetics from the Populux of the 1950s to the... What is it? The one I'm already blanking on the Google, Facebook style.
There's like cyber bougie. Yeah. Well, there's Allegria, which is like
that's the one I'm thinking of.
Weird people art that became a meme. But then all the way up now, there's like cyber bougie, and there's like a whole new set of terms people are already coming up with.
Yeah, there's this group of people called the Consumer Aesthetics Research Institute that have created this really interesting index of corporate art styles that are used, global coffee house and all these other things to describe very particular branding and product styles and internal corporate styles. And it's very connected to vaporwave because, hey, guess what vaporwave satirizes and comments on. So, yeah. And it applies to music as well, too. So it's a really good episode. I had a lot of fun with it. So, yeah, check that out. But this episode, we're talking about Barber Beats, which is a very interesting newer subgenre of vaporwave. It's only really appeared in the last couple of years because of one artist in particular. And that's where the name comes from. And also this has become sort of a perennial topic of discussion within the vaporwave community because this artist is a bit controversial. Wouldn't you say that, Burke?
Yeah, which I really had no idea until you brought it to my attention.
Yeah.
Both the genre and the controversy. So I've been doing a lot of listening and learning the past couple weeks.
Yeah. So the artist is Haircuts for Men, which makes Googling for this artist really fun because you always have to add vaporwave artist or something like that in order to actually pull up not barbershop ads and local barbershops. Mm-hmm. And that's where the genre comes from because one of Haircut for Men's albums is Barbershop Beats. And so that's become Barber Beats as a genre tag because other artists have more recently, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, have started following in Haircut for Men's footsteps.
Yeah, he's really launched a subgenre.
Yeah, which is, you can't really point to like a lot of subgenres being really pioneered by one particular artist.
And named after one album by that artist.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
Yeah. How would you characterize that album? Or like, not that just that album, but like this genre of music?
It's hard. There's a lot, like you were about to say. I think you described it as trip hop, which probably works the best for me. It's very chill, very structural, in that there tends to be like a bit of a soft intro, then drums come in. Lazy Keys, like very lo-fi, and really just pulls from a lot of chill electronica.
Yeah.
I think is probably the best way to put it. I mean, it's like super relaxing to listen to. It's like not quite as sleepy as pure like lo-fi hip hop. I think it has a little bit more going on, and it's maybe a little bit faster, but it's still very laid back. Trip hop. I think trip hop is like probably the best like single word description of it.
Yeah, with like some lounge and like depending on the artist, some of the artists in the genre add more vaporwave elements to it.
Yeah, because it is so sample based that it does depend on kind of what that person likes to, much like vaporwave, it depends on what that person likes to sample and kind of what their own musical references are, their musical history.
Yeah.
So it's like very individual in that respect from artist to artist.
Yeah, it really does. And what they do with it. And yeah, speaking of sampling, this is where the controversy really comes in with Haircut for Men in particular. Also, by the way, I was looking on Haircuts for Men Bandcamp page, which has apparently had like a checkered history. It's been taken down and put back up. Pretty much all of his albums, most of his albums are in Japanese, of course. And the first one is called Realize Too Late. according to Google Translate. I'm sure that's accurate. Came out August 14th, 2015. So I think that's about when Haircut for Men really made themselves known. So that's probably 6 years. The Haircut for Men around, and then the subgenre kind of popped up like maybe 3 years ago.
Because what was it, like 2 or 3 years ago, where he was like, "Oh, the project's dead. I have to take everything down." For a while. And it was, which I know that's what you're referencing, but I was just trying to get my timeline right.
Yeah. So the sampling issue is basically Haircuts for Men really pushes the plunderphonics to the utmost. And that's very much the controversy, is that a lot of people will listen to Haircuts for Men music. And then and a lot of people just accuse them of taking songs and slowing them down slightly and then just retitling them. And that's it. Like, and if you go to whosample.com for and look up Haircuts for Men, it's a very long list of entries. And if you look at any of the Haircuts for Men music listed on YouTube, they're like, "Oh, this is sampled." YouTube's content ID will tell you what it tagged, and you can just listen. And man, I guess we should start with an example of this. I don't know. Do you want to like get into the sample first, or do you want to like?
No, I think we should just give an example, because you only really need one to get the point. There's not going to be a lot of examples. There's just
so this is track 9. We'll play the Haircuts for Men thing first. This is track 9 from actually Realize Too Late, which translates to "We Connected." So here is "We Connected." So "We Connected," according to Who Sampled, samples "Red Hook" by LeBron. And here is that. So did you get a chance to listen to both of those?
Yeah. I mean, and I kind of already known it because we talked about this over the past few weeks. So when planning this episode, I don't know. Do you want to start off? You have opening thoughts?
Yeah. So like what I did is I took both these songs, I downloaded them both from YouTube, and then I put them in Audition and lined them up to each other. And then I kind of stretched the Red Hook, or no, not Red Hook, the "We Connected," the Haircuts for Men version, so that they would be the same length. I just stretched it so that the Haircuts for Men one is longer. So I just pushed it in, sped it up a little, and I'll get a screenshot of that and post it in our Discord. So once this episode goes live, you can see for yourself. But yeah, it's not a good look, I don't think. I mean, it's really hard because it's a really good track, but is it really his track? And I mean, it's not really Haircuts for Men. Like Haircuts for Men didn't seem to do really that much to it. Like he just kind of slowed it down. Yeah, it seems to me.
Yeah. So, this is a tough one, because my first like gut thought is, how is this any different from early, sample heavy vaporwave, which definitely had like right after Floral Shop like really blew up. There's definitely like a year period where you could just pick any classic rock song, or like really any like 70s or 80s song, and put in YouTube like song name Vaporwave.
Mhm.
And you would find someone who had just taken that song and just been like, horse with no name, Vaporwave remix. And it's just slowed down, horse with no name or whatever. I don't know. That's a weird song to pick for my example, but I'm going with it. God, I must have seen it in another joke. But yeah, which I think really did start that whole like lazy wave.
Lazy wave / plunder wave is sort of like the joke among some Vaporwave fans.
Right. Like, this is all Vaporwave is. It's just taking pop songs and slowing it down. Which is, it can be hard to argue with when you give people so many examples to use against your genre.
Yeah. And that's kind of the problem. I mean, I think Macintosh Plus, Vectroid did a lot more than just slow things down.
Right.
I think she did the interesting things with the music to make it actual Vaporwave. But a lot of the early imitators didn't. Like, they didn't see the difference. And then, like, Echo Jams is, a whole separate thing because, woof.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say is, like, those early Vaporwave albums, I just totally agree. Like, I don't know if it's like a it when you hear it type situation of, like, an artist putting in extra work, but I think those albums stand out 5-6 years later, which is not that long, but also a long time for the internet to just forget niche genres. I think the fact that those are enduring is because they were like talented producers. Not that Harris was talented, but like they were using that like in more productive ways than just copying pop. And that's why you remember that, but not all of the other shitty, I'm just slowing down other songs to try to get on this current trend.
Yeah. On the other hand, there is value in curating and mixing a certain selection of songs to go together to make a really nice listen. And I think that's what a lot of, even in the Vaporwave community, a lot of fans of Haircuts from like, Haircut steals, but whatever. It's a really good mix. It's a really good curation. It's a really good selection of songs. And I really like it. And that's the thing is I like listening to it too. It's really good. It's a certain level of, lo-fi music can put you to sleep, but like this doesn't quite do that, but it's still very relaxing, very, very chill. It reminds me of the best of like Adult Swim bumps, and Haircut also has a really nice aesthetic to his album choices, his album art. So for me, it's like a guilty pleasure. I like listening to it, but I'm always wondering what did Haircut take? Where is this actually from? And, I listen to DJ mixes all the time, and like the difference between a DJ mix and Haircuts, I feel is like the DJ like says, oh, this track is by so-and-so. And the DJ skill is selecting the track order and then like mixing from one song to the next. So in that regard, if you think of Haircuts for Men as like a DJ curating and mixing, then like, that's fine. That everyone accepts that. And it's kind of like that because Haircuts doesn't exactly like that's the other problem is like Haircuts also sells albums. Like he sells cassettes, and I don't know if he sells vinyl, but so yeah, it's really it's a complex thing.
And I tend to fall, I guess, more in the latter camp of like, I don't care. It's like fun to listen to. Partially, I guess, because I listened to it for so long without really investigating it properly, like not being a conscientious consumer.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, like going back to Plunderphonics as like a music philosophy and the idea of like, we did a whole episode on it. So we can't go into it there's no need to go into it as deep. But, really the whole idea was in the 80s was really pushing back against what was seen as like oppressive IP copyright law on music. And the idea of like, you should just be able to take samples and I should be able to take other music and just rearrange it into whatever. Which is interesting because it was always a bit of like a legal argument too, not really like a moral or ethical one. But also, I don't think it was ever this blatant because even the original Plunderphonics was like taking Michael Jackson songs and recutting them.
Yeah.
Right. And like really, really recutting them and being like something of an experiment of how much can I mangle the hyper familiar pop until it's no longer familiar, which Barber Beats is not really doing.
No. Yeah. Like traditional Plunderphonics take is to take the recorded sound as its own instrument and to transform it into something entirely different. And that's sort of like the trick of plunderphonics artists like Negative Land or like Avalanches is they create this entirely new sound by turning them inside out and making it into something else.
Or like Girl Talk becomes like a completely new song by mashing together like 30 random pop songs.
And you can pick out elements, but like,
it's something. And then I was trying to think of like, well, okay, so why does the haircuts for men stuff not really bother me? Why does Barber Beats not really register? Because it feels like unfair to the artists who they're using. And I was trying to think of like, well, what is something where like sampling doesn't even exist? Like writing, right? I think it goes right back to like your DJ mix comparison, whereas like if somebody was just like, yeah, here's my collection of short stories, and it was all just other people's short stories with more sentences in them, I would just be like, no. But if they were like, here's my, here's the best sci-fi stories of the 1990s, it's my curated anthology I've put together, I'd be like, oh, neat. I will read these short stories. And I was trying to think like why even a little bit of plagiarism in writing like really sets me off, but in music, it barely registers. And I don't know if it's like what genre you came up with, because music in some sense is like ephemeral. It only exists while it's being played. Whereas like the written word is on a page forever. So then I got to thinking like, well, what if someone did like a plagiarized short story collection, but they took audiobooks and slowed them down? What if you did library beats? And I was like, well, that's sound, but it's also writing. And I don't like, I respond very strongly to any plagiarism in writing, but don't care in music. So now I've like, what is this conundrum?
Damn. I really like that. Also, I kind of want to see like audiobooks being like really chopped up in plunderphonics. Like really, that would fucking be pretty neat. Which I think
they kind of do, right? Because isn't there like Dear Wizard Reader People or whatever that was like a remashing of Harry Potter?
Yeah, but I think that was just like an entire like reinterpretation of Harry Potter.
Oh, okay.
I think I watched some of it, like a version of it that took the audio and put it to the movie, and like it was just like basically just retelling the story.
Okay.
Like it's the same story, but like entirely different intent. So like from what I remember, it's been a while, so I may be wrong.
Okay. So thinking of like reimagining text though, if you go back to this, like just purely pushing back against copyright law versus pushing back against sampling, I don't know, we'll say it's an ethical argument. It's not really like a big one, but I'll use it as a word in contrast to a legal argument. There's a real big thing with when written text comes out into public domain and people messing with it, right? So there was that whole series where like 10 years ago, zombies were really popular. So people did like Pride and Prejudice and zombies. And it's just Pride and Prejudice, but with zombies. And I don't know, zombies can be the slow down and reverb of written word in the 2010s. They are I mean, they were as ubiquitous as bad vaporwave for a while there. Or like, last year or earlier this year, because time is slippery and irrelevant now. Everyone was like, oh, Great Gatsby's in public domain. Now we can do all kinds of wild shit with Great Gatsby.
Yeah, I wish we did see more Great Gatsby stuff. I saw a couple like one-page games. I didn't really actually see an explosion of Gatsby content.
But I guess it just got me, sorry, I'll just finish up this point real quick, but it just got me wondering, like, that's like in some form not too different from these extreme samplings, right? To just take all of Jane Austen's novel and just add zombies to it. I don't know how much they actually rewrote. I haven't read it. But the point is like that doesn't bother people. So is it that the attribution is like so clear and stated, like everybody knows? Yeah.
I think there's a difference between like public domain authors who are all dead.
That too. Yeah.
So like it doesn't matter if you're taking money. You're like, I don't care about the estates. Like, I don't like the idea of like people like a family living in perpetuity forever because, great grandpa wrote a cool book once. And so we got to pay. That family gets to live free forever. That's a little, maybe like, after nobody alive has, after everyone who has ever met the author is dead from that family, a generation removed, right? Like maybe they shouldn't have that. So free meal ticket.
Thanks, mouse.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe, carrying that back to vaporwave, it becomes like a punching up, punching down type of thing. like early vaporwave, like everybody knows you're sampling Fleetwood Mac, right?
Yeah. Or Diana Ross.
Or Diana Ross. Like, but maybe it's less clear that
because these are all like mid-list. Like if you look at the haircuts from it, who sampled, the stuff that pops up is like mostly like I would consider them kind of like mid-list. Well, not entirely. Like he apparently sampled Aphex Twin and Stevie Wonder, but he also did like LeBron is like a person I've never heard of before. And there's tons of artists there that are like, you know, lounge music, chill out artists and stuff like that. So,
and like in the popular consciousness, maybe didn't survive the sieve of time in the same way as other.
Well, a lot of these are new or like recent artists. He's like sampling like really recent, like Red Hook is from 2015.
Oh, then never mind. I take it back. I thought maybe it was like some stuff samples like late 80s, kind of early 90s forgotten R&B.
Yeah.
If that's that recent, that's a little different story too.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, that's where my problem is because he's sampling like very like artists who are still working and are not like super rich and famous. And so like that's sort of the moral argument is like we live in a capitalist society and Haircuts for Men is not giving any like royalties or like he's selling cassettes. I mean, I don't know how much money are in cassettes. You know, it's a very small market when you're selling 50 copies or something. But he's selling some stuff with, you know, working artist music. So, yeah, that's kind of like why it's sort of like, it's not so clear cut. You know, if he was just sampling Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross, like I would be like, whatever. Or like you said, artists that have been retired and have gone out of public consciousness, you know, that's like Waterfront Dining does that, I believe, a lot. Like super obscure music. I don't have a problem with that. Like if you're taking like library music, like stock music, and you're transforming it and sort of recontextualizing it, like great, good for you. But like this, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. Or even if it was like modern, lesser known artists, but some type of sample credit, I would appreciate that in a way, just because I do like a weird thing about some of these samples is that they can point you to music you'd kind of forgotten or were less familiar with. So I think that's one thing that really came out of I think it was our deep dive into lo-fi, is really looking into some of that forgotten R&B that makes it into those samples and then like kind of rediscovering like a whole lost decade of people's music. So there's like some benefit from that but if you just use it, it's harder to say like, what are we doing here?
I mean, I would think that Haircuts for Men doesn't credit anyone because, you know, by just pretending it's all his music or not, you know, sourcing his samples, not quoting the samples, it's harder for people to like take legal action against him. If he doesn't admit it, you know, you don't admit your crimes, I guess. You don't admit your copyright infringement. It's not really a crime, but so in a practical matter, that's fine. And, you know, I can't imagine he's making that much money from this, from the amount of work he seems to be doing. I mean, Haircuts for Men is putting out a lot of music. Like they have a lot of albums.
Is it pay what you want? I haven't actually.
Pretty much all of them are like
it would have to be.
Yeah. Some of them are like individual tracks that are like $1. I think that's a Bandcamp thing. But yeah, name your price. I'm just looking through here. Yeah. But like, I think they just make money from cassettes. I mean, if you look at their Bandcamp page, they have so many albums. It's like, of course they have to be just plundering a lot of music because goddamn, there are, let's see here.
Yeah. It's like one every couple of weeks.
Yeah. Like over 80 albums, maybe 60 or 80 albums, just like a shitload of music. I mean, some of these are singles, so it's kind of hard to tell, but like, there's a lot on here.
That's some Buckethead shit.
I would just say it's fine to download and listen to it and stream it, but yeah. And that's the thing is like with Vaporwave, you never know what other music you're listening to that has these same issues. You just didn't realize it, or the content ID systems didn't catch it. Like, and you have to put in this research. Like I only became aware of it because I follow the Vaporwave subreddit and read a lot of discussions on there. And that this is one of the things come up. There's another artist that this happened to, or that did this, PZA. And they've been kind of, I don't think they make music anymore because they kind of like got called out too many times for it. But it doesn't seem to affect Haircuts for Men that much because his fans just like, I mean, that's the other thing is like a lot of his fans don't do any of this research. So they just think it's all his music. And like, that's kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know is how informed in general listeners are. Because I mean, I will admit, like I didn't really think about it. Like I assumed it was like plunderphonics-y, but I never really dug into it, like I said, or the genre or the drama. But I thought it was pretty funny because, you know, we were looking at some other artists to maybe do a Barber Beats episode, one of which was Macroblank. And I guess they were, there was some Twitter shit with, because I guess Haircuts for Men released a song called like Carbon Copies. And it's like, man, that's kind of like a detachment from what you do to call out other Barber Beats people.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, it's so weird. It's such a weird little subgenre, and maybe it just needs to filter itself out. I wonder if these type of arguments happened, 5-6 years ago, 10 years ago or whatever, at the start of Vaporwave, if there was little like,
I think it's just kind of a perennial topic for Plunderphonics music, because everyone has a different line that they cross. Like some people's like, if you don't have the legal and moral permission from the original artist, it's wrong to sample, period. And then other people's like, oh yeah, just copy their music and paste it as your own. Who gives a shit? I just want to listen to good music. I don't care who makes it. I don't give a shit. And I've seen both of those people. I've seen both of those arguments on the Vaporwave discussions about Haircuts for Men. So there's a whole spectrum. Like nobody can agree on this. So I listen to it, but it's a guilty pleasure, like I said. And I'm not going to buy any of his albums or pay for any merch or anything. So
I think that's like a responsible listen, because it is still curating like a pretty cool list of music. That's true of like most Barber Beat artists. So I guess like if we both agree on that, then kind of the last thing I want to talk about or ask is, do you think that will evolve, like Vaporwave has evolved into like a post-Vaporwave? We've talked about post-Molsoft, where they have moved away from Plunderphonics, from sampling, maybe still little field recordings. You can kind of make those yourself, but moved away from its Plunderphonics roots into more creating a new genre of electronic music that is in the style that they used to be sampling. And I think that's probably going to happen to Barber Beats too. Yeah. And I hope it does, because aesthetically, independent of wherever that music's coming from, I really like it. Like I really like listening to it. So it'd be really cool if like really talented producers that put a lot more work into making original stuff that sounds like that, but is their own songs, has their own ideas. I think that would be fascinating and really good for the genre. And I think you kind of already are starting to see it. So to go back to the artists that we looked at for the first plan for this episode, one was Darkness. That was the artist you picked for her album Echoes of Crime. And I think she, in a way, is really playing with, maybe not musically as much, but like aesthetically playing with some of the tropes. Because one of the things in Barber Beats is the album cover design, which tends to be, going back to Haircuts for Men, very like Japanese city pop album cover style, where you have like a box, you have like a plain color background and like a box with a picture in it, and then like all kinds of album information in text. Like it's very text dense album covers. And I think pulling from like Vaporwave, a lot of Haircuts for Men and other artists tend to have like Greek busts or like classic era type art, but she puts like anime instead on those album covers. That's like a fun little subversion. And I know you found an article where like they were talking about the influence of anime on Mexican art. It's like her and Macross. So I think like bringing that in, and then, maybe she starts sampling different stuff, or like bringing some of that sensibility into the music. That would be like an evolution path. Yeah. And then the other artist that I was going to do is Macroblank, as I said, and their album Necromancer. And these are really like soft recommends for both those albums also, because we were going to recommend them. He's also very prolific, as is in the Barber Beats style, but has started to move more into like trip hop, hip hop stuff and away from some of the other sampling bases. So I could see that starting to evolve into its own thing. So I think it would be interesting if Barber Beats can do that. Yeah, I think the weakness of Haircuts for Men, I think Haircuts has kind of reached a professional ceiling, right? Because they, it's so sample based that they're not going to be able to do shows or really get a larger, like they're not going to get, a Pitchfork Media album review, because like they can just tell like, oh yeah, look what you did. That's pretty obvious. So I think any artist can see, oh, look, there's a real demand for this kind of music. People really like this, like trip hop that is informed by Vaporwave sensibilities, and I think that's sort of like the key thing here. And they're going to like, oh, I can just make original music in this vein. And look, it's like Haircuts for Men, but not problematic. And look, I can do shows, and I don't have to worry about copyright stuff, because it's all my music. It's all my original production.
So I think that's going to happen because that's what's happened with like other vaporwave genres. Like that's why I think a lot of like classic or traditional vaporwave has moved away from plunderphonics based stuff and to more original compositions because they realize they can do better professionally. They can reach wider audiences and, you know, not have to deal with so much bullshit if they avoid oversampling, or I guess, I mean, if you transform it so much that the content ID can't recognize it, then you're fine, you know, but yeah,
that's one way to put it. Yeah.
That's one way to put it. Yeah. You know, and there's this whole argument about, you know, about plagiarism and, you know, stuff is like, I know you and I were watching a movie a while ago and like talking about how the film's composer would just rip off his own music from previous movies, you know, like it's not unique to vaporwave. It's just like music composers. Like there's only so many ways to arrange a melody and, you know, set up a rhythm and everything. It's like, well, you know, and so it just kind of happens. It's just kind of an endemic issue to music. In some ways. Sure. Yeah.
And if you want to look more into that, I'm just going to shout out some video recommendations because there's been some pretty egregious plagiarism lawsuits in music over the past couple of years. So, of course, I'm going to point to Adam Neely and Rick Beato have both done interesting videos about how, like, this is a really common chord progression. It's dumb to claim this is plagiarism, but the jury doesn't know any better. And they bring in, like, I'm a musicologist and no one's ever done G over F before or whatever. And the jury's like, yeah, sounds like plagiarism, man. And, like, so there's the other side of it, which is like, oh, God, I'm plunderphonic centrisming, where there's like, you know, maybe too much plunderphonics exists, but also like not enough.
Yeah.
And a lot of music IP is kind of going that way, where I think you're going to see, I don't know, this is really off topic. I might cut this, but like I think you're going to start to see more and more of these like plagiarism lawsuits between pop stars of fighting over stuff, because there's been precedents that have really lowered the bar on what is like, you're copying me or have to give me songwriting credits or whatever. That's just really fascinating. So I'm going to put some links in the show notes if people want to dig into that, because there is another side of this issue, which is not allowing any freedom to be inspired by other artists.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to pretend you're a font of inspiration onto yourself, and nothing has ever inspired you ever, like Neil Breen.
Exactly. Be like Neil Breen is what I'm saying. Everybody be like Neil Breen.
Thanks for listening. Our next episode, because this is October, official, legally recognized spooky month, we're going to be doing some spooky music. We are looking through many vaporwavy spooky albums and dark ambient and synth and all. There's a lot of spooky music in these haunted genres, weirdly enough, and so we'll be excited to dive into that. And if you haven't already, please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/nightclerkradio. We have quite a few bonus episodes up at this point, discussing a lot of cool stuff, like we mentioned, corporate aesthetics, lo-fi music, all kinds of fun stuff. So check that out. And we are at Nightclerk Radio on Twitter, and I am at Ross Payton on Twitter, and Burke is at Burke McBurkinson on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page and a website, nightclerkradio.com. And that's where our show notes are. So those links to those videos, they'll be there on that website. And please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever you listen to. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies, tell strangers in the street. Just tell people about this podcast. It helps. Thanks for listening.